Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the power of story. So there are so many changes and transformations that we're undergoing individually and culturally. And story is kind of a superpower that we can harness to precipitate change and learning and transformation. So we're going to talk about that. Should be an interesting conversation, but before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so good to be with you on this Friday. The days just keep flying by. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about the power of story to change hearts and minds and to create transformation. And I was actually listening to a couple presentations this morning about presenting, about teaching, about sharing, and enrolling people, engaging people. And they were talking about the power of story. And we tend to remember stories more than we remember facts and figures. And last night, on the movie night for Sustainability Now, we had one of the co-founders of the Farmers Footprint organization, David Leon, join us. And my partner, Scott Billy, did a fabulous interview with him. And he joined us for Q&A afterwards. And the evening was really a conversation about the power of story. And what Farmers Footprint does is, among other things, create these stories about farmers who are transitioning to regenerative agriculture, who have gained an awareness of the need to move away from chemical farming, to move away from glyphosate, to move toward more natural methods to heal our soil and heal the planet and heal our food system. And it was just a remarkable evening to understand the power of story. And one of the areas that I want to talk about that in reference to is our story about the way that things are in the world. And for many years, and probably still, what we call science, which is sort of a perversion, the way that we use the word or the thought of science. In many ways, we pervert the meaning of it. But how we have used a essentially a reductionist approach to the workings of the universe. Let me not cast aspersions on science. Let's instead look at the idea that has been held for a very long time of a mechanistic universe, right? So the story is that it's just a machine, and we can, if we understand all the parts and how all the parts fit together, then we can understand the wheel works of the universe. And now, well, for quite some time, but it's taken time to be gaining traction, is the Gaia story, with the story of a living universe and a living planet and a greater system that has its own intelligence and interweavings. And when we look at life and life forms and nature and the universe from that story versus the mechanistic universe story, it becomes a very, very different place to inhabit. And so when it's interesting too, because as I'm thinking about it, in the core connection work that I do with people, it really does deal with story, because stories are symbolic, right? Stories engage a different part of our mind and being. Stories engage us emotionally. And what happens is that our experience of whatever is being shared in that story is multidimensional then, right? Because we're engaging different dimensions of ourselves and our being. And so in the core connection work, what happens is we decide what we're going to work on, and then we deal with whatever the first thing is that pops into somebody's mind. And the things that pop into their minds are often symbolic. So this was just really funny. Yesterday, I had a client say, hey, can we do like a 15-minute laser session, which is part of the package that I offer to my clients. And so we did. And she was saying that she was just really triggered. She was really triggered by an instance that had happened. And she didn't really know how to, she couldn't shake it. And so we had 15 minutes because she had another call. And I said, okay, let's just stop talking. Let's get to the point. What's the first thing that pops to mind? And she said, French fries. And she said, this is ridiculous. I said, that's okay. Let's go with the French fries. And think of this as the story that her other than conscious mind is presenting for herself. And the French fries had salt on them. They were in one of those little cardboard French fry containers, and she was eating the French fries and they were just delicious. She was enjoying them. And then she ate like 2 or 3 French fries in her mind's eye. This is a story that is being presented that she's engaged with. And they were just delicious. And then she started feeling guilty because she has this rule for herself about not eating carbs during the week. And so the desire for the French fries went away. She put the French fries aside. She put them in the fridge. In her mind's eye, this is all a story that she's creating, right? And then the guilt went away. She didn't have any desire for the French fries. And what happened was that it neutralized the thing that she had been upset about. And she also, as a result of that, was able to recognize that what she had been feeling, it was just an emotion. It wasn't who she was. And she could observe the emotion without being the emotion. And in the space, I think in 11 minutes, not the 15 that we had counted for, the issue dissolved and disappeared. And she was flabbergasted, like, what, why did this, why did this work? What, it's crazy. But what the French fries were was a metaphor for the situation that she was experiencing. There was something she was wanting. She thought she wanted all those French fries, but she really just wanted a taste, and that was enough. And so the power of stories. Good morning, good evening, Gia. Welcome. It's so good to have you here with us. And Gia, what we're talking about is the power of story. And you have often said that you really appreciate hearing the client stories that I share. And the reason that the stories are powerful is because we can then relate to them. We can put ourselves in that position. We can allow our imaginations and our right brain kind of thinking and being and our emotions to engage. And so why we're talking about story is because there are cultural shifts that occur as the result of stories. And we have had a lot of toxic stories. Just the whole January 6th thing in the US was precipitated by a story that the election was stolen, right? So this is a story that was popularized enough that it actually galvanized people, motivated people emotionally, intellectually, to actually take a profound action, all based on story and what people believed. So when we look at our beliefs, there are often stories that are behind those beliefs, justifying them, validating them. And so what I'm thinking about and suggesting is that we craft stories that engage others in creating the future that we desire, or that engage people in wanting to listen. So one of the presentations I was listening to this morning was really interesting. It was this guy, it was a man and a woman doing a presentation talking about how to engage people and using story to do that. And the one guy, I guess he worked at Microsoft, and or he did. See, now I don't even remember the details. Isn't that funny? But I do remember the story and the impact of the story. So he's a computer guy, and apparently he fixes computers, works on fixing computers and computer systems. And so he met Bill Gates, and he was watching all these people go in line and shaking Bill Gates' hands and saying, I do this, I do that, whatever. And Bill Gates was clearly bored. And so he went up to Bill Gates and he said, something to the effect of, I fix computers because a computer on every desk in every home doesn't matter if it doesn't work. Well, I butchered that, but besides the fact that I butchered that, the point is that he was using Bill Gates's own language about having a computer on every desk in every home, or something to that effect. to make a connection. And apparently Bill Gates was very intrigued and asked him, "What's your name again?" And he had engaged him. He had captured him with the power of his story, his personal story, but in such a way that he was able to really enroll Bill Gates in him. And I think that we don't necessarily recognize how powerful our stories can be in creating lessons, parables, right? The Bible stories, even, I'm not a Bible person. I'm not schooled in the Bible, but it is a storybook. It is filled with many, many stories to teach all kinds of lessons. And, our interpretation of those lessons, that's a whole other story. But the things, if we look at the narratives of our culture, we can recognize where there are places that those narratives get to be changed, where those narratives are something that we can influence. And that, in fact, in order to optimize our influence, we can utilize story. And so the power of story in, for example, Farmer's Footprint is changing a narrative that is very deeply entrenched about how agriculture works, how growing things works, how partnership with the land can work, and to be able to see ground that was dirty, just dirt rather than soil, that had been denatured, come back to life with all kinds of microorganisms and all kinds of green abundance and nutrition, to see that different practices have resulted in a rich and nutritive, nourishing soil that grows nourishing food. So transforming our story of reality, of what reality is. We can look at the whole idea of manifesting, which has become pretty much popular culture by now, right? The idea that we create, and the idea, the story that we are energy, is a very, very different story from we are a machine with mechanical parts, and that we can fix the whole machine by just fixing or replacing the parts. When we start looking at the system instead, when we start looking at the interrelationships of the elements of our bodies, and then expand that into our social relationships, our cultural relationships, our relationship with nature and the other sentient creatures and the other manifestations of nature. When we think about manifesting by shifting our energy, that's a story, a new story that empowers us to be able to move into and optimize that experience. When we, in a way, we use lots of different elements to reinforce our stories. We can use scientific data, but when we get just stuck in the weeds of the data versus the impact of the data, we lose the power of that information, because it's kind of like in school, we learn math, and many people have an aversion to learning math partly because it seems so abstract, because it seems so irrelevant. And it's irrelevant because of the way that it's taught. And part of one of these presentations that I was watching this morning was a woman who teaches engineering, and she was talking about stress fractures and what creates breakage in things. And she talked about, well, what makes your screen on your phone break? And what she did was she created an example that people could engage in experientially to better have a relationship with this information, where she actually gave some people balloons. They blew up the balloon, they had a stick, and they were to push the stick into the balloon. And some people's balloons broke, but some people's balloons kind of welded in a way to the stick. And so she was talking about the crack that is created when the stick goes into the balloon. If the crack expands enough, then the thing breaks. If the crack doesn't expand beyond a certain point, then you have a balloon on a stick. So you have the image of that now in your mind, and it makes all kinds of connections, neural connections, mental connections. You're using multiple senses in your imagination. You're visualizing something, so it's not just an abstract concept that you're trying to understand. And the stories stay. The actual equation may not, or the actual statistics may not, but there's an understanding. And another story that someone mentioned last night was from a book called Regeneration, which I have not yet read. But she said the first chapter was remarkable because the person was talking about taking a meter of soil, healthy soil, and going through the different layers of that soil and discovering all the microbes, all the different materials, the mycelium, the insects, the microbes, all the different elements in this first meter of soil. And she said she had never before reading that understood how vitally important soil was to our well-being and the well-being of the planet. And it completely transformed her understanding, her respect, and the way that she related. It actually shifted the way she related to the world, because she was able to recognize how truly alive it is. So the power of story. So I invite you to be more alert, perhaps, to how we might be able to use the power of story in our communications with others as a transformational tool, as a tool to generate greater understanding and greater compassion. It's funny because I told you the story about the French fries, and I was telling my mom about this last night, and she just couldn't get it. She just was like, "Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous." Like she couldn't understand how that kind of metaphor in this person's mind could precipitate an emotional change. But the thing is that we make these connections. We make these connections on so many different levels. Our other than conscious mind is assembling all these pieces and trying to put them together in a way that creates meaning. And isn't it amazing that salty French fries can be a vehicle of transformation, of personal shift, of releasing some kind of trigger that is activated to such a degree that it couldn't be approached in another way. You can't just tell somebody stop being aggravated. It doesn't work. But here they recognized, oh, okay, there was, I thought this and then this, and somehow they wired it together to say, that person doesn't really have something that I want. That's really what it was about. They got a taste, and a taste was enough for them. They didn't need to eat all the French fries. They didn't need to have this other experience that they were presuming this other person was having, that they could have a taste and it would be okay. And anyway, the stories we tell ourselves are also a place for us to look to see how we can create our own personal transformation. So with that, I have to run. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And it is my delight and privilege to have the opportunity to share this time with you. I'm so grateful to you. And until next time, so much love. Have a wonderful weekend.